The Tragic Tapestry by A.D. Barncord. Chapter 4. Life Interrupted. Deborah Roberts took a break from her work to have lunch with her 12-year-old daughter, Shannon. It was a weekly tradition for the two of them to have girls-only lunches. Her husband, Mike, suggested a few years ago when he realized his little girl was approaching puberty, and he hoped it would give Shannon a chance to ask her mother delicate questions without Dad being around. To keep it from looking like he was distancing himself from her, they had their own father-daughter lunches between the mother-daughter ones. Seemed silly to Deborah at the time, but now she appreciated the opportunity to have a closer relationship with her daughter. On the Terraforming Research Center on Malfina 4, education was mostly self-paced for the children, with weekly group activities. Because of the secured nature of the station, the children were allowed free playtime as long as they stayed in certain areas. Of course, children being children, they often found other areas to play in, such as the food supply warehouse with its many tunnels for the robotic distribution system. By all rights, Deborah should report her daughter's unauthorized activities in the tunnels. However, she had already had a casual conversation with the engineer in charge of the system, and he found it as amusing as she did. He reasoned that if they kept the children from doing it, they would only find somewhere else more dangerous to secretly play in. So instead, he programmed his robots to recognize the children and keep an eye on them. So, while the children thought they were getting away with not being supervised, in reality they were actually more supervised than if they had played in the designated play dome or botanical gardens. Considering Deborah's childhood history of getting into everything and anything, she was getting off rather easily on this subject. So instead of scolding her daughter, they shared their adventure stories with each other, with the provision that neither Dad nor Grandma be told. She still warned Shannon to be careful, using her old scars as evidence of what happens when someone isn't careful. "Mom, do we have an old blanket I can use?" Shannon asked. "What for, sweetheart?" "We found this empty room in the warehouse tunnels that the robots don't use, and we want to make it into our secret clubhouse." "I think we might have one," Deborah said. "I'll check later." "Thanks, Mom." Shannon stared at her food and poked at some. "Is there something else, kitten?" "Heidi says that I will have to go to a boarding school next year, like Kevin did," she said. "Your father and I weren't planning on it," Deborah said. "Do you want to go?" "No," her daughter said. "I want to stay here." "Well, as long as you keep your studies up, you won't need to go to a boarding school unless you want to. Kevin's mom said he wanted to go away to school so he could be around more kids his age." "Kevin liked telling us younger kids that we were babies," Shannon scoffed. "He didn't like the fact that I could beat him in arm wrestling." Deborah held in her chuckle. "Well, till you're ready to go to college, your father and I want to keep you around." "Not sure why," she said, winking, "but we do." Shannon smiled and ate the rest of her remaining lunch with gusto. As soon as she was off again, and Deborah returned to research. One of her simulations was about to be completed when a power surge hit the system, followed by a sonic blast. Deborah plugged her ears. When it stopped, she found that the research center had been switched to its shielded backup system. She contacted her husband through a direct line. "What happened, Mike? I thought this place hadn't... I thought we had created enough of an atmosphere to protect from slower flares." "Slower flares don't have sonic blasts, Deb," he said. "We're pretty certain it's an EMP from some ship that just appeared in the orbit." "Treven's ships?" she asked. After all, the two human civilizations had been at each other's throats for centuries. "No, not Treven's. We think they might be Cygtan ships." "Great," Deborah thought to herself. "We're being attacked by the relatives of Jiminy Cricket." Out loud she said, "Do we know what they want?" "They aren't answering our hails," Mike said. "You might want to find Shannon and get her someplace safe." Deborah ran back to their home. Of course, Shannon wasn't there. She checked the play dome and the other official play spots for the children. Then she went to the food warehouse and found the engineer who maintained the robots. "I'm sorry, Dr. Roberts," he said. "I hadn't bothered to shield the newer robots due to the cost. I think I might know where the kids are, but I can't get a working robot there because there's an out-of-commission one blocking the way." Shannon mentioned finding an empty room that the robots didn't go into. Do you know what she was talking about? The engineer nodded his head. It's one of the sea storage bay where we kept our starter ground cover seeds until we had our soil stabilized. Unless you're a robot, you're going to have to crawl to get into it. Can you show me how to get there? Follow me. The engineer ran through the main warehouse to a corridor of storage rooms, with a robot tunnel every fifth door. 2/3 down the corridor, he got on his hands and knees and began to crawl into the tunnel. Deb crawled behind him. In front of them was the stalled robot the engineer was talking about. The engineer pushed it to the junction. They took another tunnel. Then they came to a vertical tunnel with a ladder next to the rails the robots use. The engineer climbed down. Even with robots, we have to have human access to these bays, he said. They went down 2 floors and into another tunnel. Then they found 7 children. Shannon was the oldest one there. Thank God you're safe, Deborah sighed as she sat against the wall bay. Mom, is there something wrong? Shannon asked. Yes, something is very wrong, but we're going to go to a safe place now. The children followed the 2 adults. As they were about to leave the tunnel, they could hear the sounds of clicking and chirping. The engineer motioned to them to stay put and walk down the corridor. They heard him greet someone, followed by his screams and the sickening sound of bones breaking. In a low panic whisper, Deborah told the children to go back to their secret room. As the children were climbing down the ladder, she could hear the chirping echoing through the tunnels. She spun around, seeing the defunct robot and her daughter's head waiting for her to come. Shannon, Deborah said, keep the other children safe. You know these tunnels. I'm going to lead them away from here. Once they're gone, I'll send somebody to get you. But right now, I need to block that shaft you're in. Shannon nodded and climbed down. Deborah went back to the junction and pushed the robot through the corridor. She tried to see around the robot, but couldn't. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the robot down the shaft. There was only echoes of metal on concrete. Assured that she hadn't squashed her daughter, Deborah began climbing up the shaft. She made it to the catwalk over the main hangar. The sight below her was horrible. She was running across the catwalk to the control room when the plasma blast hit around her. By the time Deborah Roberts hit the ground, she was already dead.